I'm Sophia, 28, and I still remember the exact moment my mother's face contorted with rage as she screamed those words that changed everything. Standing in my childhood home's doorway, tears streaming down my face, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The argument about my career choice had escalated beyond anything I'd imagined. Get out and never come back. The venom in her voice made it clear she meant every syllable. So I did exactly what she asked. I left. I never expected the consequences, especially when my phone lit up weeks later with my dad's name, asking me the most bewildering question. Before I begin my story, where are you watching from? Hit like and subscribe to join me on this journey of family betrayal and unexpected healing. Growing up in suburban Philadelphia, our family appeared perfectly normal from the outside. We lived in a two-story colonial with navy blue shutters on a quiet street lined with maple trees. My mother, Jessica, maintained an immaculate home and an equally polished image of our family life. She worked as an administrative assistant at a law firm, but her real passion was maintaining control over her household, especially over me. From my earliest memories, I understood that pleasing my mother meant meeting impossibly high standards. A 95% on a test would be met with, "What happened to the other 5%?" Making my bed meant hospital corners and perfectly positioned pillows. Even my handwriting needed to be flawless. I spent hours practicing cursive until my fingers cramped. My father, Thomas, was her opposite in many ways. An accountant who enjoyed reading mystery novels and tending to his vegetable garden, he approached life with a relaxed attitude that sometimes felt like a breath of fresh air in our tightly controlled home. But his easygoing nature had a downside. He avoided conflict at all costs, especially with my mother. Whenever tensions rose, he'd suddenly remember yard work that needed immediate attention or disappear into his home office. Then there was my younger brother Kyle, 3 years my junior. While I faced constant scrutiny, Kyle seemed to float through life on a cloud of parental approval. His average grades were celebrated, his messy room overlooked, and his needs always prioritized. The disparity wasn't subtle. My mother explained it away as boys will be boys, while expecting nothing short of perfection from me. Throughout elementary and middle school, I threw myself into academics and extracurriculars, hoping to finally earn my mother's approval. I joined the debate team, played violin in the school orchestra, volunteered at the local animal shelter, and maintained a 4.0 GPA. My walls were covered with certificates and ribbons, physical proof of my worth that somehow never seemed enough for Jessica. Any attempt to assert independence was quickly shut down. When I was 14 and wanted to try out for the school play, my mother pointed out that serious students don't waste time pretending. When I asked to attend a school dance at 15, she questioned my priorities and reminded me that colleges don't accept students based on their social lives. Each rejection came with the same underlying message: my desires were secondary to her vision for my life. Our family's financial situation complicated things further. Though we were middle class, Kyle's travel baseball team strained our budget. His equipment, private coaching, and tournament fees meant sacrifices for everyone else except him. I started working part-time at 16, first at the local library and then adding weekend shifts at a coffee shop. I told myself it was to save for college, but deep down, I knew it was also to reduce the financial burden I represented to the family. As college approached, the tension between my mother and me reached new heights. I wanted to study business with a focus on marketing. She had decided law school was my destiny, despite my complete lack of interest in becoming an attorney. "You've always been good at arguing," she'd say, as if that were qualification enough. What she meant was I'd become good at defending myself against her criticism. My father watched this power struggle from the sidelines. Occasionally, he'd offer a week, "Maybe we should let Sophia decide her own future," only to immediately backpedal when my mother's icy glare turned his way. In rare moments when we were alone, usually when he drove me to work or picked me up from school, he'd ask genuine questions about my interests and dreams. Those brief connections made his otherwise passive role in my life even more painful. I knew he cared, but not enough to stand up for me. Our family home became both sanctuary and prison. My bedroom, painted pale blue with white trim when I was 10, remained unchanged through high school. My mother refused my requests to redecorate, calling it unnecessary and wasteful. The kitchen, with its granite countertops and stainless steel appliances, was where most arguments erupted, usually during dinner when my mother would interrogate me about my day, searching for flaws to correct. Kyle and I had been close as young children, building blanket forts and creating elaborate backstories for our stuffed animals. But as the preferential treatment became more obvious, resentment crept in. By high school, our relationship had cooled to polite interaction with occasional genuine moments. He seemed largely oblivious to the different standards we lived under, accepting his golden child status as natural rather than manufactured. Throughout these years, I developed what I now recognize as depression. I slept too much or not at all. I lost interest in activities I'd once enjoyed. Food became functional rather than pleasurable. But these warning signs were dismissed by my family. My fatigue was laziness, my withdrawal was teenage attitude, and my diminished appetite was praised as watching my figure. The only person who seemed to notice something was wrong was my father, who once asked if I was doing okay while driving me to work. When I started to explain how I really felt, he nodded absently, then changed the subject to safer territory. By the time I graduated high school, I'd perfected the art of living two lives, the perfect daughter at home and the real Sophia everywhere else. It was exhausting, but it was survival. And I counted down the days until college would provide the distance I desperately needed. 4 years of college at Penn State gave me my first taste of real freedom. Though I came home for major holidays and occasional weekends, I deliberately crafted my schedule to maximize time away. I joined business clubs, took summer internships in different cities, and built a life that was distinctly mine. Most importantly, I excelled in my marketing courses, confirming that I'd chosen the right path despite my mother's disapproval. Graduation day should have been purely joyful. I'd finished with honors, securing a position with a respected marketing firm in Philadelphia. My classmates celebrated with champagne and plans for the future. My family attended the ceremony, my mother commenting on how impractical the graduation gowns were and how the university should really organize these events better. My father beamed with pride but remained characteristically quiet. The job offer came 2 weeks before graduation, an entry-level position with clear advancement potential. The starting salary was modest but fair, and the company had an excellent reputation. When I called home to share the news, my mother's response was immediate and cutting. Marketing? Still chasing that fantasy? The deadline for law school applications hasn't passed yet. Despite her reaction, I accepted the position and moved into a small but charming apartment in Philadelphia's Fairmount neighborhood. It was the first space that was truly mine, decorated with colorful throw pillows, framed vintage advertisements, and plants on every windowsill. For nearly 2 years, I established my career while maintaining obligatory but limited contact with my family. Sunday dinners once a month, occasional phone calls, and requisite holiday gatherings kept appearances without requiring real connection. Then came the promotion. After consistently exceeding targets and bringing in 2 major clients, my boss offered me a step up to marketing coordinator with a significant raise. The catch? The position involved quarterly travel to client sites and industry conferences. It was an incredible opportunity that would fast-track my career and exactly the kind of independence my mother had always fought against. The day before everything imploded, I drove to my parents' house for our monthly Sunday dinner. The May evening was unseasonably warm, with lilacs blooming along the driveway and golden late-afternoon light streaming through the kitchen windows. The familiar smell of my mother's lasagna, the only Italian dish in her otherwise strictly American repertoire, filled the house. I arrived intentionally late, at 5:07 p.m. rather than the mandated 5 p.m., a small act of rebellion that didn't go unnoticed. My mother's tight smile and pointed glance at her watch communicated her disapproval without words. Kyle was already seated at the table, scrolling through his phone while my father tossed salad in the wooden bowl that had been a wedding gift to my parents 29 years earlier. "So glad you could fit us into your busy schedule," my mother said, placing the steaming lasagna on the table with more force than necessary. The passive-aggressive comment hung in the air, but I chose not to engage. Instead, I shared my news about the promotion, trying to keep my voice casual despite the excitement bubbling beneath the surface. They're really happy with my work, and the new position comes with some great opportunities. My father looked up from the salad. That's wonderful, sweetheart. We always knew you'd do well. His genuine pride was a balm to my nerves. What exactly does a marketing coordinator do that's different from your current job? My mother asked, cutting precise squares of lasagna and serving Kyle first, then my father, then herself, and finally me. More responsibility, mostly. I'll be overseeing campaigns rather than just executing them. And I'll be the main point of contact for our larger clients. I deliberately omitted the travel component, saving that landmine for another moment. Kyle finally looked up from his phone. Does it pay more? That's the real question. Yes, about 20% more, plus better benefits. I took a bite of lasagna, which was, as always, perfectly executed if somewhat bland. Well, that's something at least, my mother conceded. Though I still don't understand why someone with your intelligence chose marketing over law. My friend Barbara's daughter just made partner at her firm, and she's only 32. We've been over this, Mom. I have zero interest in law. Marketing challenges me creatively and analytically. I love what I do. I delivered some version of this speech countless times. Creative, she repeated, making the word sound frivolous. Well, I suppose as long as it pays the bills. My father attempted to redirect the conversation. The garden's coming along nicely this year. The tomato plants are already flowering. For a while, we discussed safer topics, the neighbor's new fence, Kyle's latest girlfriend, an upcoming sale at my mother's favorite department store. Then, as my mother served her signature lemon pound cake for dessert, she circled back. So this new position, will it affect your ability to visit? Your grandmother was just saying she hardly sees you anymore. And there it was, the real concern. Not my happiness or success, but my availability to fulfill family obligations. I'll still come for Sunday dinners when I can, I said carefully. But part of the new role involves some travel. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Travel? What kind of travel? Her fork paused halfway to her mouth. Quarterly client visits, some industry conferences. It's standard in this field. How long would these trips be? Her voice had taken on the dangerous quietness I recognized from childhood confrontations. Usually just a few days, maybe a week for the bigger conferences. She placed her fork down with deliberate precision. I see. So your career now takes priority over family commitments. My father jumped in with forced cheerfulness. That sounds like a great opportunity for you to see new places, Sophia. Remember how you always wanted to travel? But the damage was done. Though the conversation moved on, the undercurrent of tension remained for the rest of the evening. When I left, my mother's hug was stiff, her goodbye clipped. That night in my apartment, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake replaying the dinner, rehearsing better responses, and dreading the inevitable follow-up call from my mother. By morning, I had convinced myself that I'd overreacted. Surely she wouldn't still be angry about something so reasonable as business travel. When my phone rang the next day around noon, I answered with false brightness. Hi, Mom. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, she began without preamble. We need to discuss this further. Can you come over after work today? Something in her tone made my stomach knot. I have plans tonight, I lied. But I can come by tomorrow. This is important, Sophia. Family should come first. The implication was clear. Whatever my plans were, they couldn't possibly be as important as her desire to continue this conversation. I can't today, Mom. I'll come by tomorrow after work. Standing my ground felt both terrifying and necessary. A pause, then, fine. We'll expect you at 6 p.m. sharp. The rest of my workday was colored by dread, a familiar feeling from childhood when I knew a confrontation was brewing. By the time I pulled into my parents' driveway the following evening, my shoulders were tight with tension, and I'd already taken 2 antacids to combat the acid burning in my stomach. Little did I know that this ordinary Tuesday would be the last time I'd walk into my childhood home as the daughter who always, eventually, gave in. I arrived at exactly 6 p.m., determined not to give my mother any additional ammunition. The house was quiet when I entered, no television noise or kitchen sounds, just the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I found my mother in the living room, sitting ramrod straight in her favorite armchair, a cup of tea on the side table beside her. My father was in his recliner, pretending to read a magazine but clearly on high alert. "Hello, Sophia," my mother said, her voice unnervingly calm. "Thank you for coming." "Where's Kyle?" I asked, settling on the couch across from them. "At the gym. This conversation concerns you and us." She gestured between herself and my father, though he hadn't looked up from his magazine. I braced myself. "So what did you want to discuss?" "Your father and I have been talking about the future," she began, picking up her teacup and taking a delicate sip. "Specifically, about Grandma and Grandpa's care." This wasn't what I'd expected. My maternal grandparents were in their early 80s, still living independently in their own home about 20 minutes away. "Are they okay?" I asked, genuine concern momentarily displacing my anxiety. "They're managing for now, but they're not getting any younger. Your grandfather's arthritis is worsening, and your grandmother's memory isn't what it used to be." She placed her cup down with precision. "They'll need more help soon." I nodded slowly. "That makes sense. Have you looked into home health aides or assisted living options?" My mother's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Those are last resorts, Sophia. Family takes care of family. That's how we were raised." An uneasy feeling began to form in the pit of my stomach. "So what are you thinking?" "Well," she said, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from her slacks, "your father and I have discussed it, and we think the most sensible solution is for you to move back home." The statement hung in the air like a bomb waiting to detonate. I stared at her, certain I'd misheard. "Move back, here?" I finally managed. "Yes. We have plenty of space, and you'd be close to your grandparents. You could take them to appointments, help with groceries, check in on them regularly." She spoke as if this were a completely reasonable request. "And of course, you'd save on rent." My father finally looked up from his magazine. "It would only be temporary, Sophia. Just until we figure out a more permanent arrangement for your grandparents." But I knew better. In my mother's world, temporary arrangements had a way of becoming permanent expectations. "That's not possible," I said quietly. "I have my job, my apartment, my life in the city." "You can find another marketing job closer to home," my mother dismissed. "Or commute if you must. Plenty of people commute. It's not just about the job, Mom. I built a life for myself in Philadelphia. I have friends, activities, commitments." I could feel my heart rate accelerating as the familiar sensation of being cornered returned. "More important than family commitments," she challenged. "Than helping your grandparents who have always been there for you." "That's not fair." "Of course I want to help, but moving back home isn't the only way to do that. I can visit more often, maybe take them to appointments on weekends." My mother's eyes narrowed. "Weekend visits won't be enough, and you know it. Besides, with your new job requiring travel, you'll be even less available." And there it was, the real issue. Not my grandparents' care, but my growing independence. "So this is actually about my promotion," I said, the pieces falling into place. "This is about priorities, Sophia. You seem to be prioritizing your career over family obligations." "I'm 28 years old, Mom. Building my career is exactly what I should be doing at this stage of my life." She leaned forward, her voice taking on the lecturing tone I knew all too well. "There's more to life than career advancement. Family should always come first. Your father and I have sacrificed so much for you and Kyle. I understand that, and I'm grateful. But that doesn't mean I should put my life on hold indefinitely. It's not indefinitely. And it's not putting your life on hold, it's being responsible. Her volume was increasing slightly with each exchange. This selfishness is exactly what I worried about when you chose marketing over a more serious profession. The comment stung, as it was meant to. My career choice isn't selfish. And it is serious. I'm good at what I do, Mom. Really good. This promotion proves that. A promotion that takes you further away from family responsibilities, she countered. How convenient. My father cleared his throat. Maybe there's a compromise here. Sophia could stay in her apartment but commit to specific days to help with your parents. Both my mother and I turned to look at him, surprised by his intervention. But my mother quickly recovered. That's not a solution, Thomas. They need consistent, reliable help. Not whenever it fits into Sophia's busy social calendar. I don't have a busy social calendar, I defended. I work hard. Sometimes that means long hours and yes, occasionally travel. That's the reality of building a career. Well, the reality of family is that sometimes we have to make sacrifices, she shot back. Your father and I certainly did. The conversation was circling, and I could feel my frustration mounting. I'm not saying I won't help, Mom. I'm just saying there are options besides me moving back into my childhood bedroom and giving up the independence I've worked for. Independence, she scoffed. Is that what you call it? Running away from responsibility? It's not running away to live my own life. I've earned this promotion, this apartment, this life I've built. Why can't you be happy for me instead of trying to control every decision I make? Her face flushed. Control? I've only ever wanted what's best for you. No, you've wanted what you think is best for me, which isn't the same thing at all. You've never respected my choices or trusted my judgment. Because your judgment has been questionable. Marketing instead of law, that cramped apartment instead of saving for a house, prioritizing work travel over family needs. I stood up, unable to remain seated with the adrenaline coursing through me. My judgment is just fine. I'm succeeding in my career, I have healthy relationships, I'm financially independent, all without following your life plan for me. My mother rose as well, her voice rising with her. Don't take that tone with me, young lady. After everything we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me, Mom? Besides criticize every choice, doubt every decision, and make me feel like I'm never good enough? The words hung in the air between us, sharp and impossible to take back. My father stood now too, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Let's all calm down, he suggested, his voice strained. This isn't productive. But 28 years of suppressed frustration had broken through the dam of my restraint. No, Dad, I'm tired of calming down. I'm tired of pretending everything's fine when it's not. Mom has never approved of anything I've done unless it followed her exact specifications. That's absurd, my mother sputtered. I've supported you plenty. Who paid for your piano lessons? Your college application fees? Who drove you to every debate tournament? Financial support isn't the same as emotional support. You did those things because they fit your image of who I should be, not because they were what I wanted. The front door opened and closed, and Kyle appeared in the living room doorway, workout bag slung over his shoulder. He took in the scene, all three of us standing, faces flushed, tension thick enough to cut. Whoa, he said. What's going on? Your sister thinks her career is more important than family, my mother said immediately, seeking an ally. Kyle looked confused. Because of the promotion thing? Isn't that a good thing? It's more complicated than that, my father explained weakly. There's the issue of your grandparents needing more help. And Mom thinks the solution is for me to move back home and give up my life in Philadelphia, I added. Kyle frowned. Seriously? Can't they just get one of those medical alert button things? It's not that simple, my mother snapped. And Sophia needs to understand that family obligations don't disappear just because she has a fancy new job title. I never said they did. I protested. I just said there are other solutions besides me sacrificing my career and independence. There's that word again, independence. As if family is some kind of prison you need to escape from. It feels that way sometimes. Especially when you try to dictate my every move and make me feel guilty for building my own life. My mother's face contorted with anger. After everything I've sacrificed for you, this is the thanks I get? Accusations and disrespect? I'm not being disrespectful, I'm being honest. There's a difference. Enough. Her voice rose to a shout. I will not be spoken to this way in my own home. If your career and independence are so important to you, if family means so little, then fine. Get out and never come back. The room fell silent. Even the grandfather clock seemed to hold its ticking breath. Mom, Kyle said, breaking the silence. You don't mean that. I do mean it, she said, her voice deadly quiet now. If Sophia thinks she can speak to me this way, if she values her job over her family, then she doesn't need to be part of this family anymore. I felt as if I'd been slapped. My chest tightened, making it hard to breathe. I looked to my father, whose face had gone pale, but he said nothing. Just stood there, silent as always when it really mattered. Fine, I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the tears building behind my eyes. If that's what you want, I'll go. I grabbed my purse from the couch, not bothering with the light jacket I'd draped over the back of a chair. It was May, I wouldn't freeze. Sophia, wait, my father finally said, but it was too little, too late. No, Dad. Mom's made her position clear, and so have you with your silence. I moved toward the door, then turned back one last time. For the record, I never said my job was more important than family. I just wanted both. But apparently, that was asking too much. My mother stood rigid, arms crossed, expression unyielding. My father looked torn but remained rooted in place. Kyle's confused gaze darted between us all. I walked out, closing the door behind me with a quiet click rather than the slam my emotions demanded. I got into my car, hands shaking so badly I could barely insert the key into the ignition. As I backed out of the driveway, I caught a glimpse of my father's face watching from the living room window. But he didn't come after me. No one did. I drove aimlessly for nearly an hour, tears blurring the familiar suburban streets until I couldn't see clearly enough to continue. I pulled into the parking lot of a shopping center closed for the night, cut the engine, and finally let myself break down completely. Gut-wrenching sobs tore through me, leaving me gasping for breath in their wake. I cried until my throat was raw and my eyes burned, until there seemed to be no tears left in my body. When the storm of emotion finally subsided, I realized I had nowhere to go. My apartment was 30 minutes away, and I didn't trust myself to drive that distance in my current state. Making a quick decision, I booked a room at the Marriott Courtyard just 2 miles away, using the hotel's app so I wouldn't have to speak to anyone at check-in. The hotel room was sterile and anonymous, beige walls, generic artwork, stiff white bedding. I sat on the edge of the bed and called the only person I knew would understand. Amelia? It's me. My voice cracked. Something happened. My best friend since freshman year of college listened without interruption as I recounted the evening's events, her occasional "oh my god," and she didn't the only indicators she was still on the line. You can stay with me if you need to, she offered immediately when I finished. The couch pulls out. Thanks, but I'll go back to my place tomorrow. I just couldn't drive there tonight. Do you think your mom meant it? About never coming back? I closed my eyes, seeing again the cold fury on my mother's face. Yes. Yes, I do. And your dad just stood there? He didn't say anything? You know how he is. Conflict avoidant to the core. The familiar disappointment washed over me. He only spoke up when I was already walking out the door, and even then, it was just my name. Not "don't go" or "she doesn't mean it" or anything useful. After promising to call her the next day, I ended the call and fell into a fitful sleep still wearing my work clothes, too emotionally exhausted to bother changing. Morning brought no messages or missed calls from my family. Not that I'd expected any. My mother never apologized, and my father never contradicted her. Still, the silence stung. I checked out of the hotel and drove directly to my apartment, calling in sick to work for the first time since I'd started the job. The day passed in a haze of numbness and sporadic crying jags. I kept my phone nearby, glancing at it every few minutes despite knowing it wouldn't ring. By the second day, anger began to replace shock. I returned to work, throwing myself into preparations for my new role. I stayed late, volunteered for additional projects, and filled every potential moment of reflection with activity. My boss commented on my impressive dedication, unaware it was driven by the need to outrun my thoughts rather than genuine enthusiasm. The first week passed, then the second. Not a word from my parents or Kyle. I checked my phone obsessively, jumping whenever it buzzed only to find work emails or texts from friends. I began leaving it face down to avoid the constant disappointment. Physical symptoms manifested almost immediately. I lost 5 pounds in the first 2 weeks, food turning to ash in my mouth. Sleep became elusive. I'd lie awake until 3 a.m., then drag myself through the workday on caffeine and adrenaline. My normally clear skin erupted in stress-induced breakouts. Anxiety attacks ambushed me in grocery store aisles and during client meetings, leaving me breathless and dizzy. Gradually, I established new routines. Sunday dinners with my family were replaced by video calls with Amelia or solo trips to the farmer's market. I changed my emergency contact at work from my father to Amelia. I found a therapist through my company's employee assistance program and began weekly sessions that left me emotionally drained but incrementally clearer. What your mother did is called emotional cutoff, Dr. Patel explained during our third session. It's an extreme reaction to conflict where someone completely severs contact rather than working through difficult feelings. But I didn't cut them off, I pointed out. She told me to leave and never come back. Yes, she initiated the cutoff. But maintaining awareness of family dynamics can help you understand what's happening and make conscious choices about how to respond. Those therapy sessions became anchors in my week, helping me navigate the sea of grief, anger, and confusion. I began to recognize patterns in my family's behavior that stretched back decades, seeing for the first time how my role as the scapegoat and Kyle's as the golden child had shaped our family system. Small moments of breakdown caught me unprepared. Shopping for a birthday card for Amelia, I spotted a "For My Daughter" card with a sentimental message about a mother's pride and burst into tears in the middle of Target. Passing a father and daughter laughing together at an outdoor cafe sent me hurrying down the street, vision blurred. Even cooking certain meals, anything that resembled my mother's recipes, became emotional landmines. At work, concerned colleagues noticed the change in my demeanor. My normally friendly, engaged presence had become subdued and mechanical. "Everything okay at home?" my cubicle neighbor asked one afternoon after I'd been staring blankly at my computer screen for 20 minutes. "Just some family stuff," I replied vaguely. "Nothing to worry about." But privately, I worried constantly. Despite the pain they'd caused, these were the people who had known me my entire life. The sudden amputation of these relationships left phantom limb pain that no amount of distraction could fully alleviate. Dr. Patel encouraged me to build new connections and strengthen existing ones. "Humans need belonging," she explained. "If your family of origin isn't providing that, create a chosen family who will." Taking her advice, I joined a book club that met monthly at a local cafe. I accepted invitations I might have previously declined due to family obligations. I reconnected with college friends who lived in the city, scheduling regular brunches and movie nights. These new social rituals gradually began to fill the Sunday-shaped hole in my life. I also focused on making my apartment truly mine in ways I'd previously held back, perhaps subconsciously knowing my mother would disapprove. I painted an accent wall deep teal, hung artwork that spoke to me rather than matched the furniture, and adopted a cat from the local shelter, a tiny violation of my lease that brought immense comfort during lonely evenings. As weeks passed, I found myself deleting family photos from my phone, not all at once, but gradually, as if slowly removing bandages from a wound to let it breathe. The sight of my mother's smile or my father's arm around my shoulders had become too painful to encounter unexpectedly. Social media became complicated territory. I didn't unfriend or block my family members but muted their accounts to avoid sudden emotional ambushes. Still, I occasionally found myself scrolling through their profiles late at night, a form of digital self-harm that left me feeling hollow. My mother posted photos of a family dinner 3 weeks after our fight, Kyle and my father smiling stiffly at the camera, an empty chair visible at the edge of the frame that I knew had been mine. The caption read, "Sunday family tradition," with no acknowledgement of my absence. The erasure was both painful and strangely validating, proof that I wasn't imagining the dysfunctional dynamics. The most unexpected emotion that emerged as weeks turned to a month was relief. Without the constant criticism and judgment, without the Sunday dinners that left me emotionally drained for days afterward, I found myself breathing more easily. My anxiety, while still present, became more manageable. I began to recognize how much energy I'd spent trying to earn approval that would never come, how exhausting the hypervigilance had been. That relief is important information, Dr. Patel noted. It doesn't mean you don't love your family or miss aspects of your relationship with them. It means the dynamic was causing you harm. Work became both refuge and achievement. I excelled in my new role, earning praise from clients and colleagues alike. The travel component that had been such a point of contention with my mother became a welcome opportunity to experience new cities and build professional relationships. I began to recognize my own competence without the shadow of my mother's criticism dimming the recognition. My first major holiday away from family was Memorial Day, typically celebrated with my father's elaborate barbecue and my mother's meticulous table settings. Instead, I joined Amelia and several other friends for a potluck picnic in Fairmount Park. Bringing homemade potato salad, my own recipe, not my mother's, I felt a strange combination of grief and freedom as we spread blankets on the grass and shared food and conversation in the warm May sunshine. To chosen family, Amelia toasted, raising her plastic cup of lemonade. The phrase resonated deeply, bringing unexpected tears to my eyes even as I smiled and echoed the sentiment. By the 6-week mark, I'd established a new normal. Not healed, not whole, but functioning. I'd stopped checking my phone for messages that never came. I'd stopped rehearsing conversations with my mother in my head. I'd even stopped expecting my father to suddenly find the courage to reach out. Then, on an ordinary Wednesday afternoon, my phone lit up with a name I'd begun to think I'd never see again, Dad. While I was rebuilding my life one painful piece at a time, I had no idea what was happening in my family home. It wasn't until much later, through conversations with my father and eventually Kyle, that I learned how my absence had affected the household I'd left behind. The night I walked out, my mother maintained her righteous anger for hours, telling my father and Kyle that I'd always been selfish and would come crawling back when I realized how good I had it. She cleaned up the untouched dinner with sharp, angry movements, slamming cabinet doors and muttering under her breath. My father, true to form, retreated to his garage workshop, methodically organizing tools that were already perfectly arranged. Kyle, uncomfortable with the tension, made an excuse about meeting friends and escaped for the evening. The house settled into an uneasy silence broken only by the sound of my mother's aggressive cleaning. The next morning, when I didn't call to apologize as she'd expected, my mother became increasingly agitated. She checked her phone frequently, the lack of notifications clearly unsettling her. By evening, when my father gently suggested calling me, she snapped, "Absolutely not. She knows what she did. The ball is in her court." Days passed with no contact. The first Sunday after our fight, my mother prepared dinner as usual, setting the table for 4 before hesitating and removing my place setting. When my father questioned this, she simply said, "Sophia made her choice." Kyle later told me the meal was excruciating, strained conversation punctuated by long silences, my absence an elephant in the room that no one dared acknowledge directly. He said he'd considered texting me but worried about getting caught in the middle. This was typical Kyle, well-intentioned but ultimately unwilling to risk his own comfortable position in the family hierarchy. When extended family members or friends asked about me, my mother crafted a careful narrative. Sophia's so busy with her new promotion, we hardly see her these days. The fiction preserved appearances while allowing her to avoid admitting what had really transpired. My father, ever the conflict avoider, went along with this story, though Kyle said he could see the strain it caused him. A week after I left, my maternal grandparents, the supposed reason for the argument, came for their regular Friday lunch. "Where's Sophia?" my grandmother asked immediately, having grown accustomed to my occasional presence at these gatherings when my work schedule allowed. "She's very busy with work," my mother replied smoothly. "Her new position keeps her in the city most of the time." My grandfather, sharper than my mother gave him credit for, sensed something amiss. "You two have a falling out?" he asked directly. "Nothing serious," my mother deflected. "Just a difference of opinion about priorities." My grandmother, who had always seen through my mother's manipulations, fixed her with a knowing look. "Jessica, what did you do?" The directness of the question caught my mother off guard. "I didn't do anything. Sophia chose her career over family obligations. She made that perfectly clear." My grandmother hummed skeptically. "That doesn't sound like Sophia." The conversation moved on, but the seed of doubt had been planted. My grandparents began calling me directly, bypassing my mother entirely. Though I never shared the full story with them, not wanting to burden them with family drama at their age, their continued connection became a lifeline I hadn't expected. As the second week without contact stretched into a third, subtle changes began occurring in the household. Kyle, who had never experienced the full force of my mother's controlling nature with me as a buffer, suddenly found himself the sole focus of her attention. His casual dating life, his less than meticulous apartment, his occasional weekend beers with friends all came under scrutiny that had previously been directed primarily at me. It was like suddenly living under a microscope, he told me later. Every decision I made was questioned, every plan analyzed. "I started to understand why you always seemed so stressed around Mom." This new dynamic created tension between Kyle and our mother, something he'd rarely experienced before. Used to being the favored child, he struggled to navigate her disapproval and criticism. Their arguments, while never reaching the intensity of my final confrontation, became increasingly frequent. Meanwhile, my father grew quieter than usual, if that was possible. He went through the motions of daily life, work, yard maintenance, meals. But without his usual mild contentment. Kyle described him as like a ghost haunting his own life. 3 weeks after I left, my father did something completely out of character. Without telling anyone, he drove past my apartment building during his lunch break. He didn't attempt to come in or contact me. He later admitted he just needed to see where I was living, to assure himself I was okay. He sat in his car across the street for nearly 20 minutes, hoping to catch a glimpse of me entering or leaving, but eventually had to return to work without that reassurance. This secret pilgrimage became a weekly ritual for him, though he never worked up the courage to actually approach my building or call me. It was as if he existed in a limbo of his own making, unwilling to defy my mother by reaching out directly but unable to simply accept my absence. Family events grew increasingly strained as my absence became more noticeable. My cousin's graduation party, my uncle's birthday dinner, the annual neighborhood block party, each occasion prompted questions about my whereabouts that my mother deflected with increasingly elaborate explanations about my work commitments. The facade cracked slightly when my father's sister, Aunt Diane, cornered him at a family gathering. "Thomas, what's really going on with Sophia? She hasn't returned my calls in weeks." Unable to maintain the fiction under direct questioning from his favorite sister, my father admitted there was a disagreement. Jessica told her not to come back until she changed her priorities. Shocked, Aunt Diane pressed for details. My father's abbreviated explanation omitted my mother's exact words but conveyed enough that Aunt Diane understood the severity of the situation. She reached out to me that same evening, becoming another unexpected source of support and family connection. The most significant change occurred in my parents' marriage. For 29 years, their relationship had operated on a clear understanding. My mother made the decisions, and my father went along with them. My removal from the family system disturbed this balance in ways neither had anticipated. For weeks after our fight, my father finally broke his pattern of acquiescence. During another Sunday dinner, when my mother made a disparaging comment about my stubbornness, he put down his fork with uncharacteristic firmness. "That's enough, Jessica," he said quietly. "This has gone on long enough." My mother stared at him, clearly stunned by the interruption to her monologue. "Excuse me?" I said. "That's enough. Sophia isn't stubborn, she's building a life for herself, just like we raised her to do. This silent treatment has gone on too long." "She's the one who walked out," my mother countered. "She's the one who hasn't called or apologized." "After you told her to get out and never come back," my father pointed out, his voice gaining strength. "What did you expect her to do?" Kyle, witnessing this unprecedented confrontation, remained silent but wide-eyed. "I expected her to realize she was being ridiculous and come to her senses," my mother snapped. "Not disappear for a month." "She's not being ridiculous, Jessica. She's a grown woman making reasonable choices about her own life. And the longer this goes on, the less likely it is she'll ever come back at all." The argument continued for nearly an hour, my father maintaining his position with a steadiness he'd never before displayed. Though no resolution was reached that night, a significant shift had occurred. For the first time, my father had openly challenged my mother's narrative and defended my choices. Over the next week, tension between my parents escalated. My mother became increasingly irritable as she realized my father wouldn't back down on this issue as he had on countless others throughout their marriage. My father, having finally found his voice, seemed unwilling to return to silence. Kyle, uncomfortable with his new position in the crossfire, began spending more time away from home. Without me to absorb our mother's controlling tendencies, he'd become the default target. Accustomed to a lifetime of easy approval, he found this new scrutiny almost unbearable. The breaking point came exactly 6 weeks after I'd walked out. During breakfast, my mother mentioned canceling the annual family beach vacation since the family isn't complete anyway. My father looked up from his toast with newfound determination. "I'm calling Sophia today," he announced. "This has gone on long enough." My mother's coffee cup hit the saucer with a sharp clink. "I forbid it." My father's laugh held no humor. "Forbid? Jessica, she's my daughter too. I've respected your feelings for 6 weeks, but I'm done waiting for you to see reason. If you call her, you're undermining my authority," my mother warned. "Your authority?" My father's voice rose slightly. "She's 28 years old, not 8. Neither of us has authority over her anymore." My mother's face flushed with anger. "Fine. Call her. But don't expect me to welcome her back with open arms unless she apologizes and agrees to be more considerate of family obligations." "I'm not asking you to do anything," my father replied, standing and carrying his plate to the sink. "I'm simply telling you that I'm calling our daughter today." And so, at 2:17 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon exactly 6 weeks and 1 day after I'd walked out of my childhood home, my phone lit up with my father's name for the first time since the night everything fell apart. I was in a meeting when my phone buzzed with my father's call. The sight of his name on my screen sent such a jolt through me that I completely lost track of what my colleague was saying about conversion metrics. I excused myself with a murmured apology about an urgent personal matter and stepped into the hallway, heart pounding as if I'd sprinted upstairs. For a moment, I just stared at the phone, watching it vibrate in my palm. Part of me wanted to reject the call out of self-protection. Where had he been for 6 weeks? Another part desperately wanted to hear a familiar voice from the life I'd lost. Before I could overthink it further, I swiped to answer. "Hello?" My voice sounded strange to my own ears, formal and guarded. "Sophia?" My father's voice was exactly the same, slightly hesitant, warm but cautious. "It's Dad." An absurd response rose to my lips. I know, I have caller ID, but I swallowed it. "Hi." An awkward silence stretched between us. I leaned against the wall, waiting. He had called me, after all. "How are you?" he finally asked. I'm okay. The answer was automatic, non-committal. How are you? Good, good. Weather's been nice lately. I closed my eyes briefly. 6 weeks of silence, and he wanted to talk about the weather. Yes, it has. Work going well? It is. Busy with the new position. That's good. I'm glad to hear it's working out. Another silence. I could hear him breathing, could picture him sitting in his home office, probably fidgeting with a pen as he always did during phone calls. Dad, I finally said, did you need something? Oh, no, not really. Just checking in. He cleared his throat. Actually, I was wondering, why have you stopped coming to family dinners? The question hit me like a physical blow. I pulled the phone away from my ear and stared at it in disbelief before responding. Are you serious right now? What do you mean? He sounded genuinely confused. I stepped into an empty conference room for privacy, closing the door behind me. Dad, Mom told me to get out and never come back. Those were her exact words. And you stood there and said nothing. A long pause followed. She was upset, Sophia. You know how she gets. Yes, I do know how she gets. But this time was different, and you know it. I struggled to keep my voice steady. She literally kicked me out of the family, and not one of you has contacted me in 6 weeks. Until now. Well, we thought you were just busy with work, he said, his voice uncertain. Your mother told everyone you were focused on your new position and couldn't make it to family events. I sat heavily in a conference chair, stunned. She told people I was too busy for family? After she explicitly told me to get out and never come back? She didn't mean it literally, Sophia. Then how exactly did she mean it, Dad? Because it seemed pretty literal when she said it to my face and when none of you called or texted for 6 weeks. Another silence, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. I'm sorry, Sophia. I should have called sooner. The simple acknowledgement loosened something in my chest, allowing me to breathe more fully than I had in weeks. Yes, you should have. Things have been tense at home, he continued. Your mother is, well, she's being your mother. And Kyle is struggling with some of the attention that used to be directed at you. Despite everything, I felt a twinge of sympathy for my brother. I can imagine. Would you? He hesitated. Would you be willing to meet for lunch? Just the two of us? We could talk properly. I closed my eyes, considering. Part of me wanted to refuse on principle. Why should I make anything easier for him after 6 weeks of silence? But another part, the part that still missed my family despite everything, nudged me toward agreement. When were you thinking? I asked, neither accepting nor refusing outright. How about this Saturday? We could meet somewhere in the city, near your apartment. The eagerness in his voice was palpable. I'd prefer somewhere neutral, I said. Not near my apartment. If he was hurt by the implied boundary, he didn't show it. Of course. Wherever you're comfortable. We settled on a restaurant halfway between my apartment and my parents' house, a casual Italian place neither of us had been to before. No history, no associations. Neutral ground. Saturday at noon, then, he confirmed. I'll be there. I paused, then added, Does Mom know you're calling me? His hesitation told me everything. Yes. She's not happy about it, but yes, she knows. And Kyle? He knows too. He's. Another pause. He's confused by the whole situation, I think. Your mother hasn't exactly been forthcoming about what happened. I'm not surprised. I glanced at the clock on the conference room wall, aware that I needed to return to my meeting. I should go, Dad. I'm at work. Of course, of course. I'll see you Saturday. After hanging up, I sat in the conference room for several minutes, trying to process what had just happened. My mother had been telling people I was too busy with work to attend family functions, effectively erasing the conflict and her role in it. My father had waited 6 weeks to reach out. And his first question had been why I'd stopped coming to family dinners, as if I'd simply decided to skip them for no reason. The rest of the workday passed in a blur of distraction. I made it through my meetings on autopilot, my mind continuously circling back to the conversation with my father and the upcoming lunch. By the time I arrived home that evening, I felt emotionally exhausted yet restless with anticipation and anxiety. I called Amelia immediately, needing to process the development with someone who understood the full context. "My dad called today," I said as soon as she answered. "What? After all this time? What did he say?" Her indignation on my behalf was comforting. I recounted the conversation, including his bewildering question about why I'd stopped attending family dinners. "It's like they're living in an alternate reality where Mom didn't kick me out." "That's gaslighting, pure and simple," Amelia declared. "Your mom is rewriting history, and your dad is either complicit or completely clueless." "I think it's a bit of both," I sighed. "He's never been good at standing up to her, but this is extreme even for him." "Are you going to meet him for lunch?" "Yes. Saturday." "Are you sure that's a good idea?" The concern in her voice was evident. "Honestly? I'm not sure of anything anymore. But I think I need to hear what he has to say, even if it's just more excuses." I picked at a loose thread on my couch cushion. "I need closure, I guess. Or at least more information about what's been happening in the family since I left." Amelia remained skeptical but supportive. "Just promise you'll call me right after, okay? And remember everything Dr. Patel has been working on with you about boundaries." The days until Saturday crawled by with excruciating slowness. I rehearsed what I would say, imagined every possible scenario from tearful reconciliation to another explosive argument. Dr. Patel squeezed me in for an extra session on Friday afternoon, helping me prepare emotionally for the meeting. "Remember that you can leave at any time," she reminded me. "You're not obligated to sit through manipulative or hurtful conversations. Your well-being comes first." The night before the lunch, I barely slept. I tried on and discarded multiple outfits, wanting to appear put together and professional rather than wounded or desperate. I finally settled on a navy blue dress with structured shoulders and a pair of low heels, an outfit that made me feel confident and competent. Armor of a sort. Saturday morning dawned sunny and mild. I spent extra time on my makeup, concealing the dark circles under my eyes and applying lipstick with precise care. My hair went into a sleek ponytail, tidy, controlled, just like I needed to be for this encounter. The drive to the restaurant felt surreal. The same car, the same roads I'd driven countless times, but everything fundamentally changed. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel as I navigated through weekend traffic, rehearsing opening lines and responses in my head. I arrived 15 minutes early, intending to select a table and compose myself before my father arrived. But as I pulled into the parking lot, I spotted his silver Accord already there. Of course, punctuality had always been his one form of rebellion against my mother's tendency to run deliberately late to assert control. Taking a deep breath, I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror, squared my shoulders, and stepped out into the warm June sunshine, heading toward a conversation that could either begin healing or confirm that some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. I spotted my father immediately upon entering the restaurant. He'd chosen a booth in the corner, partially screened by a decorative partition covered with fake grapevines and twinkling lights. The restaurant was moderately busy, enough ambient noise for privacy but not so crowded that we'd feel rushed. He stood awkwardly as I approached, hovering half in, half out of the booth, clearly uncertain about the appropriate greeting. 6 weeks ago, he would have hugged me without question. Now, we existed in an in-between space where familiar gestures no longer felt natural. I solved the dilemma by sliding directly into the opposite bench. "Hi, Dad." "Sophia." He settled back into his seat, eyes scanning my face with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "You look good." "Thanks." I busied myself arranging my napkin on my lap, avoiding his gaze. Have you been waiting long? Just about 10 minutes. I ordered water for both of us. He gestured to the 2 glasses on the table. Thanks. I took a sip, grateful for the momentary occupation. A server approached with menus and a basket of breadsticks, providing a welcome interruption. We both ordered iced tea and took more time than necessary studying the lunch options. Finally, with orders placed and menus removed, we faced each other without distraction. How have you been, really? He asked, his voice gentle. Managing, I replied, deciding honesty was the best approach. The first few weeks were really hard. I'm doing better now. He nodded, fidgeting with his silverware. Your apartment is okay? Work is going well? Yes to both. The promotion has been challenging but rewarding. My boss is pleased with my performance. That's good. That's really good. He broke a breadstick in half without eating it. I drove by your building a few times. Just 2. I don't know. Make sure it was still there, I guess. The admission surprised me. You did? Every Wednesday at lunch. He looked embarrassed. I never got out of the car. I just needed to see where you were. A complicated emotion rose in my chest, anger that he'd come so close without contacting me, but also a strange tenderness at the image of him making this secret pilgrimage. You could have called. I know. He set down the mangled breadstick. I should have. I was. He trailed off, searching for words. Afraid of Mom's reaction? I supplied. His wince confirmed my assessment. Partly. But also. I didn't know what to say. How to fix this? It wasn't your job to fix it alone, Dad. But some acknowledgement that I hadn't just disappeared by choice would have helped. He had the grace to look ashamed. I know. I'm sorry, Sophia. Truly. The simple apology, delivered without excuses or qualifications, loosened something in my chest. Thank you for saying that. Our drinks arrived, providing another brief reprieve from the intensity of the conversation. I stirred my iced tea, watching the lemon wedge bob among the ice cubes. How are things at home? I finally asked. My father's shoulders slumped slightly. Tense. Your mother is. He hesitated, searching for a diplomatic description. She's struggling, though she'd never admit it. Struggling with what, exactly? With your absence, primarily. Though she'd rather attribute her mood to a dozen other things than acknowledge that. He took a sip of his tea. And with me, lately. I've been less accommodating than usual. Meaning you've actually expressed opinions? The words came out sharper than I'd intended. Rather than becoming defensive, he surprised me with a rueful smile. Exactly that, actually. It hasn't been well received. I can imagine. I'd never witnessed my father directly challenging my mother on anything significant. And Kyle? Kyle is getting a crash course in being the only child under your mother's microscope. He's not adapting well. He shook his head slightly. He's had some arguments with her that sound remarkably similar to ones you used to have. Despite everything, I felt a twinge of sympathy for my brother. That can't be easy for him. No, it's not. He's mentioned calling you several times, but I think he's caught in the middle, unsure of where his loyalties should lie. Our food arrived: chicken parmesan for my father, fettuccine alfredo for me. We both used the interruption to gather our thoughts, thanking the server and arranging our plates before continuing. Sophia, my father began, his voice taking on a more serious tone, things at home haven't been the same without you. Your mother won't admit it, but she misses you. I set down my fork without taking a bite. Dad, she told me to get out and never come back. Those were her exact words. I know, and they were wrong. Completely wrong. He met my eyes directly. But you know how she is: proud, stubborn, convinced she's always right. She said those things in anger. That doesn't make them less hurtful. Or less meant in the moment. No, it doesn't. He conceded the point with a nod. But is there no room for forgiveness? For being the bigger person? There it was, the familiar refrain that had shaped my entire childhood. Always, I was expected to be the mature one, the reasonable one, the one who compromised. Never my mother, never Kyle, and certainly never my father himself. I've been the bigger person my entire life, Dad, I said quietly. I've swallowed my feelings, adjusted my dreams, sacrificed my needs to keep the peace. I'm tired of being the only one expected to bend. He looked genuinely startled by this statement. Sophia, that's not. It is, though. I interrupted firmly. Think about it. When has Mom ever apologized for anything? When has she ever admitted she was wrong or considered someone else's perspective? When have you ever truly stood up to her before a situation reached crisis point? His mouth opened, then closed without words. I could see him mentally searching for counterexamples and coming up empty. And you enabled it, Dad. Every time you stayed silent when she criticized me, every time you suggested I just go along with whatever she wanted to avoid conflict, every time you retreated to your garage instead of addressing the actual problem. The words poured out now, years of unspoken frustration finding release. You taught me that my feelings weren't worth defending, even to you. His face crumpled slightly. I never meant to. I thought I was keeping the peace. You weren't keeping the peace. You were avoiding discomfort at my expense. I took a deep breath, trying to modulate my tone. I needed you to be my advocate, Dad. Not just when she wasn't looking, but openly, consistently. I'm sorry, Sophia. I truly am. His voice was rough with emotion. I failed you as a father. The simple acknowledgement, free from excuses or deflection, caught me off guard. I had expected defensiveness, perhaps even a retreat into the familiar pattern of asking me to understand my mother's perspective. Instead, he was owning his responsibility in the dynamics that had caused me so much pain. Thank you for saying that, I said finally, my own voice unsteady. We both turned our attention to our cooling food, using the meal as an excuse to regain composure. After a few bites, my father spoke again. Kyle is experiencing some of what you dealt with for years, he said quietly. He's bewildered by it. The other day he asked me how you managed to stay so calm when your mother got like that. A bitter laugh escaped me. I wasn't calm. I was suppressing everything because expressing it never helped. I see that now. He pushed pasta around his plate. Your leaving has changed things. Revealed patterns that were always there but somehow easier to ignore when you were absorbing most of the impact. That's not exactly comforting, Dad. No, I suppose it's not. He set his fork down. But it's led to some realizations. For me, especially. About how I've failed both my children in different ways. I sipped my tea, waiting for him to continue. I've been reading some books, he admitted, looking slightly embarrassed. About family dynamics. Dysfunctional patterns. He named several titles I recognized from my own post-estrangement research. I've suggested family therapy. This genuinely surprised me. Family therapy? What did Mom say to that? Initially? She called it ridiculous and unnecessary. A hint of the new backbone he'd apparently developed showed in his wry smile. But I persisted. She's grudgingly agreed to meet with someone next week for an initial consultation. Wow. I couldn't hide my shock. I never thought she'd agree to that. Neither did I, honestly. But I think your absence has affected her more than she's willing to admit. He hesitated before adding, I believe she genuinely misses you, Sophia, though her pride won't let her say it. I remained skeptical. Missing someone doesn't automatically translate to treating them better. No, it doesn't. He acknowledged with a nod. That would require actual work and change on her part. On all our parts. The server returned to check on us and refill our drinks. When she departed, I asked the question that had been hovering since my father's call. So what exactly are you hoping for from this lunch, Dad? For me to come back as if nothing happened? To attend Sunday dinners again with someone who literally told me to get out and never come back? He shook his head firmly. No. I wouldn't expect that, and it wouldn't be healthy anyway. He took a deep breath. I'm hoping we can start rebuilding, slowly, on new terms. Beginning with you and me today. Perhaps adding Kyle when you're ready. And eventually, if she's willing to do the work, including your mother. That's... I searched for words. More reasonable than I expected, honestly. The books have been helpful, he admitted with a small smile. As has seeing the impact of your absence on our family system. And if Mom refuses to change? If she expects me to simply apologize and return to the status quo? Then we'll have to find a new normal that might not include everyone at the same table at the same time. His certainty surprised me. I'm not willing to lose my daughter again because your mother can't adapt. The statement, so clear, so firm, so unlike the father I'd known my entire life, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I blinked them back quickly, unwilling to break down in a public restaurant. I appreciate that, Dad. The check arrived, and my father reached for it automatically. I didn't protest. Not because I needed him to pay, but because it seemed important to him to do this small, fatherly thing. As we prepared to leave, he looked at me seriously. I'll talk to your mother about what really happened that night, make sure she understands that her words were the reason you left, not some choice you made to prioritize work over family. I can't promise she'll respond well, but the truth needs to be acknowledged. Thank you. I gathered my purse, suddenly exhausted by the emotional weight of the conversation. And the family therapy? You'll really follow through with that? First appointment is Thursday evening, he confirmed. Even if it's just me and Kyle initially, it's a start. We walked to the parking lot together, stopping beside my car. The awkwardness of saying goodbye returned. Were we at the hugging stage yet? A handshake seemed absurdly formal, but anything more felt premature. I'll call you after the therapy appointment, he said. Let you know how it goes. If that's okay? That's okay, I agreed. I'd like to hear. He nodded, hands in his pockets, looking suddenly older and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. Sophia, I want you to know. I'm proud of you. Of the life you've built, the career you've chosen, the strength you've shown. I should have said that years ago, and consistently. The simple words I'd longed to hear throughout my childhood and young adulthood unlocked something in my chest. Impulsively, I stepped forward and gave him a quick hug. He returned it carefully, as if afraid I might shatter or change my mind. Thanks, Dad, I said, stepping back. I'll talk to you next week. As I drove away, I watched his figure growing smaller in my rearview mirror. He stood in the parking lot, watching until my car turned the corner and disappeared from view. I wasn't sure what would come next, whether this tentative reconnection would lead to healing or further pain. But for the first time in 6 weeks, I felt a small flame of hope that perhaps not everything had been permanently broken that night. The following Thursday, as promised, my father called to report on the first family therapy session. He, my mother, and Kyle had attended together, a fact that surprised me, as I'd expected my mother to find a last-minute excuse to avoid it. How did it go? I asked, curled on my couch with a cup of tea, my therapy day ritual. About as well as could be expected for a first session, he replied diplomatically. Your mother was resistant initially. But Dr. Winters is quite skilled. She managed to keep things productive despite the tension. Did Mom acknowledge what actually happened the night I left? A pause. Not entirely. She admitted to saying those words but maintains they were spoken in the heat of the moment and weren't meant literally. I sighed, unsurprised but still disappointed. Classic. Yes, well. It's a start, at least. She's agreed to continue the sessions, which honestly is more than I expected. His voice brightened slightly. And Kyle was quite insightful, actually. He acknowledged that he's been oblivious to a lot of the dynamics between you and your mother. The revelation that Kyle might be developing some self-awareness came as a pleasant surprise. That's good to hear. Dr. Winters suggested that healing might need to happen in stages. She recommended I continue building my relationship with you separately from any reconciliation attempts with your mother, at least initially. That sounds sensible, I agreed, relieved that the therapist understood the complexity of the situation. Would you be open to breakfast this Saturday? There's a diner near your apartment that's supposed to have good pancakes. The invitation touched me. I'd like that, Dad. Our Saturday breakfast became a weekly tradition over the following month. Sometimes we talked about serious things, family dynamics, his ongoing therapy insights, my own therapeutic journey. Other times, we kept it light. His garden's progress, my latest work project, a movie we'd both enjoyed. It was a slow rebuilding of connection on new, healthier terms. 3 weeks after our first lunch, I received an unexpected text from Kyle. Can we talk? Need some advice about handling Mom. I called him that evening, curious about this unprecedented request. My brother had never sought my advice about anything, let alone navigating our mother's controlling tendencies. She's driving me crazy, he confessed after awkward initial pleasantries. Everything I do is wrong suddenly. My apartment is too messy, my girlfriend isn't serious enough about her career, I'm not saving enough for retirement at 25. How did you deal with this for so long? The question held genuine respect. I'd never heard from him before. Not very well, honestly. I internalized a lot of it. That's part of why I'm in therapy now. She wants me to move back home too, he revealed. Says it's about helping with Grandma and Grandpa, but I think she just wants me under her thumb. That sounds familiar, I said dryly. Dad told me what really happened that night, what Mom actually said to you. His voice grew serious. I'm sorry, Sophia. I should have reached out sooner. I didn't know what was real. Mom kept saying you were just busy with work. It's okay, Kyle. We were both raised in this dysfunctional system. It's hard to see clearly from the inside. We talked for nearly an hour, a more honest conversation than we'd ever had as siblings. By the end, we'd made plans to meet for coffee the following week, another small step toward rebuilding family connections on healthier terms. Meanwhile, changes were occurring within my parents' household. My father, emboldened by therapy and our regular conversations, had begun taking small stands. He reported cooking dinner twice a week now, despite my mother's criticism of his culinary skills. He had started speaking up when my mother made disparaging comments about me, refusing to let my absence be rewritten as a selfish choice rather than a response to her ultimatum. The most significant development came nearly 2 months after our initial reconciliation lunch. During one of our Saturday breakfasts, my father asked if I would consider joining them for a family therapy session. Dr. Winters thinks it might be beneficial, he explained, watching my reaction carefully. But only if you're comfortable with it. She suggested a structured session with specific ground rules to ensure it remains productive. I hesitated, fork suspended over my waffles. Will Mom be there? Yes. She's agreed to participate under Dr. Winters' guidelines. He added quickly, which include no accusations, no interrupting, and focusing on feelings rather than blame. After discussing it thoroughly with my own therapist, I agreed to attend. Dr. Patel helped me prepare emotionally, establishing clear boundaries and exit strategies if the session became toxic. The family therapy office was deliberately neutral territory, a modern space with comfortable seating arranged in a circle rather than the confrontational setup I'd feared. Dr. Winters, a calm woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and perceptive eyes, greeted me warmly and explained the session's structure before my family arrived. Seeing my mother for the first time in over 2 months was jarring. She looked somehow smaller than I remembered, her perfect posture slightly diminished, new lines visible around her mouth. Our eyes met briefly as she entered, hers quickly skittering away in what might have been discomfort or shame. Kyle gave me an awkward half-wave, while my father offered an encouraging smile as they took their seats. The tension in the room was palpable as Dr. Winters began the session. "We're here today to begin healing a painful family rupture," she stated simply. "Not to assign blame or rehash hurt, but to understand each perspective and find a path forward, whatever shape that might take." What followed was the most honest family conversation we'd ever had. Under Dr. Winter's skillful guidance, each of us shared our experience of the night I left and the aftermath. When my turn came, I spoke directly about the pain of being told to leave and never return, of the silence that followed, of building a life without the family I'd grown up with. My mother listened without interruption, a minor miracle in itself. When her turn came, she struggled visibly, her hands twisting in her lap. "I said things I shouldn't have," she finally admitted, the closest she'd come to an apology in my memory. "I was afraid of losing control of the family I'd worked so hard to build." When Sophia chose her career over what I thought was best, it felt like rejection of everything I valued. "It wasn't a rejection of you," I said quietly when Dr. Winters prompted me to respond. "It was an embrace of myself." The breakthrough wasn't dramatic, no tearful embraces or instant healing. But it was a beginning. My mother acknowledged, however reluctantly, that her words had driven me away. I acknowledged that I understood her fear, even if I couldn't accept her methods of expressing it. We agreed to proceed cautiously, more family therapy sessions, but also individual relationships developing at their own pace. The delicate reconstruction of something that could never be exactly what it was before, but might eventually be healthier. 2 weeks later, Kyle and I established our own tradition: monthly hikes in the state park, neutral ground where we could talk freely while focusing on the physical activity rather than the potential awkwardness. During our second hike, he confessed something that surprised me. "I always envied your certainty," he said as we climbed a steep trail. "You always seemed to know exactly what you wanted, while I just drifted along the path of least resistance." "I wasn't as certain as I appeared," I admitted. "I just knew I couldn't live the life Mom wanted for me without losing myself completely." "I'm starting to understand that now," he nodded thoughtfully. The first real test of our fragile new family dynamic came with Thanksgiving. After much discussion in both individual and family therapy, we agreed to a carefully structured holiday meal at my parents' house. I would arrive late and leave early, limited exposure while still participating in the family tradition. Walking into that house for the first time since the explosive argument was surreal. The familiar smells of turkey and my mother's signature cranberry sauce, the sound of the football game my father always watched while waiting for dinner, the seasonal decorations my mother refreshed each year, all of it both comforting and anxiety-provoking. My mother greeted me with uncharacteristic restraint, a stiff "hello, Sophia," rather than criticism of my tardiness or choice of outfit. My father squeezed my shoulder supportively as he took my coat. Kyle gave me a conspiratorial wink from the couch. The meal itself was an exercise in careful navigation. We stuck to safe topics: the food, the unusually warm November weather, an uncontroversial movie most of us had seen. When my mother began to ask probing questions about my work schedule, my father gently redirected the conversation. The moment of true significance came as we finished dessert. I mentioned casually that I'd been invited to present at a marketing conference in Chicago the following month. "That sounds like a wonderful opportunity," my father said immediately. My mother's fork paused halfway to her mouth. I could see the conflict play across her face, the instinctive desire to question or criticize battling with the new awareness of where that had led before. After a visible internal struggle, she managed, "How long will you be gone?" "Just 3 days," I replied, bracing for disapproval. She nodded stiffly. "Well, I'm sure you'll do well." It wasn't enthusiastic support, but it wasn't criticism either. For my mother, it represented significant restraint and possibly even growth. I caught my father's eye across the table, his slight nod acknowledging the importance of the moment. I left after dessert as planned, hugging my father and Kyle, exchanging an awkward nod with my mother. It wasn't perfect, but it was a tentative step toward a new kind of family relationship. The holidays that followed continued this careful dance of boundaries and accommodation. Christmas involved an abbreviated appearance at my parents' annual party rather than the full-day obligation of years past. My birthday in February featured a restaurant dinner where we each drove separately, ensuring I had an easy exit strategy if needed. My mother's efforts at change were inconsistent but notable given her lifelong rigidity. She slipped occasionally into old patterns of criticism or control, but more often caught herself mid-sentence, visibly redirecting. My father continued his unexpected evolution into a more active participant in family dynamics, gently but firmly maintaining the healthier boundaries we'd established. The most profound shift occurred gradually over those first 6 months of reconciliation. I realized that my own inner voice, that constant critical narrator that had followed me since childhood, had begun to quiet. The distance from my mother's daily criticism, combined with therapy and new relationship patterns, allowed me to separate my sense of self-worth from her approval. My career continued to flourish, with the promotion leading to increased responsibility and recognition. When I received an unexpected opportunity for an international assignment in London, a 3-month project establishing a new branch office, I approached the family discussion with trepidation but determination. Rather than announcing it at a family gathering where the pressure of multiple witnesses might provoke defensiveness, I met with my parents individually. My father responded with genuine excitement and support. My mother, though visibly struggling with the idea of me being overseas, managed a remarkable response. "I won't pretend I'm thrilled about you being so far away," she said honestly. "But I can see how important this is for your career. And it's only for 3 months." The acknowledgement of my priorities without accusations of selfishness represented significant growth for her. When I thanked her for understanding, she surprised me further. "I'm trying, Sophia," she said quietly. "I don't always succeed, but I am trying." It was the closest we'd come to a heart-to-heart conversation in my memory. Not an explicit apology for years of control and criticism, but an acknowledgement of effort toward change that felt meaningful in its humility. The final scene of this chapter in our family story played out at a family dinner the week before my departure for London. Unlike the tense, stilted gatherings of the past, this meal featured genuine conversation, occasional laughter, and a surprising level of comfort. As we finished dessert, my favorite lemon cake that my mother had made without being asked, I shared some final details about my upcoming assignment. "The London office wants me to lead their rebranding launch," I explained, unable to keep the pride from my voice. "It's a huge opportunity to demonstrate what we can do in the European market." My father's smile was immediate and genuine. "That's fantastic, Sophia. They obviously recognize your talent." My mother set down her coffee cup carefully. I could see her making an effort, choosing her words with deliberate care. "Will you have support there? People to help you navigate a new city?" The question held concern rather than criticism, a distinction I was still learning to recognize from her. "Yes, the company has arranged temporary housing and a liaison to help with the transition. And I'll be working with a team I've already collaborated with remotely." She nodded, then offered something I never would have expected a year earlier. "I'm proud of you, Sophia. This is a significant achievement." The words I'd longed to hear throughout my childhood and young adulthood, delivered without qualification or follow-up criticism. My father reached across the table and squeezed my hand, his eyes reflecting my own surprise and emotion. "Thank you, Mom," I managed, my voice steady despite the unexpected wave of feelings. Kyle raised his water glass in a spontaneous toast. "To Sophia and London." As everyone joined the toast, I looked around the table at these familiar faces now arranged in new patterns of relationship. Not perfect, not fully healed, but fundamentally changed. My father, finding his voice and quiet strength. Kyle, developing awareness and empathy. My mother, struggling against lifelong patterns but making genuine efforts to change. And me, no longer defined by their expectations or approval. Sometimes you have to leave to create the space for a healthier return. Walking out that door months ago hadn't been an ending after all, but the painful, necessary beginning of something new. The old family dynamic had shattered that night, but from those broken pieces, we were carefully assembling something more authentic, a family connected by choice rather than obligation, by mutual respect rather than control. As I looked at my mother across the table, our eyes met in a moment of genuine connection. We weren't who we had been, any of us. And perhaps that was exactly as it needed to be. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you loved to preserve yourself? What would you have done in Sophia's situation? Tried to make peace earlier or maintained your boundaries? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more content about family dynamics and personal growth. Share with someone who might need to hear that sometimes setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's the first step toward healthier relationships for everyone involved. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember that healing isn't always linear, but it is always possible.